Hey, well, looks like we're back here again. So, first day of 2020 has been and gone. It was actually not that bad. Well, relatively speaking. So, since this is technically the first proper video in this vlog series, I thought I'd spend it just telling you a lot about me and sort of my life story, but not the entire thing, if that makes sense. So, there's obviously, if you clicked on my channel, odds are you probably know me. So, I'm Alec. I'm 19 years old. Currently, at the moment, I'm studying at the University of Leicester, but that is susceptible to change. That will be explained in a future video. I was born in Surrey, but as soon as I was born, I got rushed to Great Ormond Street Hospital in London for intensive care. So those of you who don't know, Great Ormond Street is a completely child-centred hospital. It provides really, really high-quality care to really, really ill children. So, for example, if you're born and you've got severe brain damage, you will be taken to Great Ormond Street. In my case, I was born and there was an issue with my heart, so I was rushed to Great Ormond Street, and I spent the first 6 weeks of my life in an incubator box. But in fairness, I was born a month early. I've been getting everywhere early for quite literally all my life. What else? I did some time in Army Cadets during secondary school. There's going to be a separate video all about my time in Army Cadets during a later video. I think that's about the 15th or 16th, that one's coming out. I've done stagecoach and musical theatre for about 10 years. So that's been a big, and is still a big part of who I am. If you ask anyone who's known me in the last couple of years, they will say, known me, they will probably say, big theatre kid. And I am the first to admit, that is very true. Very, very true. Yeah. I also suffer from a condition called osteogenesis imperfecta. In layman's terms, that means brittle bone disease. So, what my condition means is my bones are weaker because it's a genetic defect that hampers my ability to absorb and contain things like calcium, vitamin D, and the kind of things that make bones strong and healthy. Now, as a result, I'm very much on the milder end of that spectrum. There have been cases in the past where they could quite literally just touch something and they could fracture. Obviously, a lot of people who I went to secondary school with, when they first found out about my condition in year 7, they misconstrued it as a case similar to that. But by the end of it, they were just like, yeah, he's basically a normal kid and is kind of a cunt. Which is kind of true. Being completely honest, I was a dick at secondary school. There'll be a separate video all about that. As a result, that also affects my teeth, hence the gap. Was a prosthetic. These teeth had been restored prosthetically. However, last night, the prosthetic that was in there came out, and I am still, obviously it's New Year's Day, nowhere's open, so I'm still waiting for treatment to get that either replaced or something. Whether it'll be just creating another prosthetic or getting rid of the remaining tooth and then putting a completely new prosthetic tooth in, I don't know. That'll be entirely down to the surgeon who does the treatment. I'm also asthmatic, very mildly, but still there. Yeah. So, continuing on from the osteogenesis from my brittle bones, I thought I would talk a bit about the various injuries that I've had over the course of my life. So, obviously, there's been I think in the 30-something that I've had, but I'm going to talk about a couple that I remember vividly and that have impacted my life, that have somehow impacted my life. So the first one was in reception. I broke my feet. I completely split my femur in two. So it sort of disjointed it as well. So it displaced. Clean break, but displaced. So as a result, I couldn't walk. I couldn't even stand up. So ambulance was called to my infant school, which was Holmesdale Community Infant School in Reigate, and it was amazing. They couldn't have handled it better. So ambulance came onto the playground. I went up in a gurney off to hospital. Spent 6 weeks in hospital on traction, and then about another month after that in a cast. Then, interestingly, with that break, the day that I got discharged from hospital to go home, my father actually got taken to hospital because he'd fallen off his bike and pretty severely injured his right leg. Then the next injury that had a proper longer last. So as a result of that femur injury, one leg is about half a centimetre shorter than the other. My left leg's half a centimetre shorter. Doesn't really affect me, it just means I have a tiny bit of a limp as I walk. Not noticeable unless it's pointed out most of the time. It is just there. So the next injury that I have a completely clear memory of having and it affecting me was August 2015 when I broke my arm. And this was the first time I'd injured myself not at school or at home. So it wasn't, and because it was on summer camp with Army cadets. Embarrassingly, it goes to show that my condition isn't always the best, because a fellow cadet who I can't even remember his name now, but I remember he was a large guy, he was a big guy, and whether that's fat or muscle, I do not know, but sat on the arm and it fractured the bone about there. Tiny little fracture, but was it enough for me to be put into plaster? And to Surrey Army Cadets' credit, they handled it really well. Like the instructors that were there, one of them took me to A&E, stayed with me. Then the next day when I had to go back for a fracture clinic, they went with me and tried their best to include me during the rest of the camp as they could, which was brilliant, and I cannot thank them enough for that support. Then was the big one. December the 1st, 2015. This was because this is the one injury that I have needed surgery for. It hasn't just been healed with a simple cast. Now, to this day, I'm still not completely sure as to what exactly happened, but what I remember was I was at secondary school. It was during lunchtime break. I was running around the school, having a game with a mate. Tripped. Now, there was 3 things I could have tripped on. 1, my own clumsy feet. 2, the road I was running along had speed bumps on because it was between the front gate and the car park, because the layout of my secondary school was a bit weird that way. Then 3, and what I think is it, but I can't say for sure, was someone's foot, because it was kind of near a crowd at the same time. Now, at the time, I had a very heavy backpack on, which probably didn't contribute, and I'd also landed funny. So my elbow, from about that much of my elbow, had shattered, completely shattered. And as a result, I could barely walk because of the pain. So went to hospital. They immediately put me into a plaster cast to try and keep it together. Was given morphine for the first time, which was, it was interesting. It was an interesting experience. Then taken to a ward, and the next day I went into theatre for 6.5 hours. As a result, I had to have metal work put in to reshape the bone and help it grow into the shape it should have grown. So that was three plates, 1 plate along there, 1 plate along there, 1 plate on the inside of the arm, 30 pins to fix those plates to the bone, and I think that was it. Then was put in a plaster cast for a month, kind of ruined that Christmas for me. Then 2 months later, in February, some of the metal work was taken out. So like the plate on the inside here was taken out. Then, but because I'm, as you can see, skin and bone, especially on around my elbows, the metalwork actually broke the skin and it became an open wound. Obviously, that's a very big cause for concern because infection, and it looks horrible. So I was then booked in to have the remaining metalwork removed because the consultants that were helping me were confident that the bone had healed enough and would continue to heal on its own without the metalwork in. So booked in, but because of the sheer extensive nature of the metalwork, I had to have it done at King's College Hospital in London. So I went up there, had it all removed, and it was, I think, about a couple of days, I just could not use the arm. Then about a week later, I started to be able to use it again. And I still can't completely use it. It is still weaker, but it's not weak as in so weak it can't be used. It's just a bit weaker than a normal arm should be. And I also can't fully straighten the arm, which is fun to explain to people, but is still impacting on my life. Then last injury I had, and then that injury on the elbow was the last major injury that I had until December the 1st, 2020. 1st of December seems to be a bad day for me every 5 years. So that wasn't major, it's just because it's very recent and I remember it to the minute. I'm not saying, you know what I mean. So I broke 2 of my toes, and because I was in my flat I was in my university halls, and home is about 2.5 hours drive away, my family couldn't help. So one of my friends that I've made at uni, she came down, helped me out to an Uber. I got an Uber to the hospital. They gave me crutches, and I was on crutches for 3 weeks. All healed now. I went back yesterday to have the strappings taken off. It's all good. Well, still hurts a bit, but that's just because it's still tissue damage was caused. So yeah, what else? I think that's probably about as much as I was going to say. So, Happy New Year, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it, and see you all tomorrow.